we have seen the same pattern among creators. Shakespeare left London, he wrote King Lear. So this time that we're in is very strange, but it can also may be a very deeply creative time.
We hear so much in the news now that we are in a circumstance that nobody in any of their lifetimes has ever experienced or come across. And while the circumstances we find ourselves in may be unprecedented in modern history, it certainly isn't unprecedented in the history of human civilization. And so I wanted to ask, how was the plague a reality for the early modern period?
Well, the plague came through Europe in general and would wipe out as much as a fourth of the population, a fifth of the population, and it came in waves. So for Shakespeare, so he's got his career set in London. He's become the foremost playwright, and they had what were called bills of plague. So when a certain number of people died of the plague in the suburbs or in the center of the city, they would have to close the theaters. And that had a huge effect on his livelihood in the way it is now. It's like all the restaurants suddenly closed down. Same thing happened with the theaters. So they set up patronage systems so that the playwrights were still paid. Not the playwrights, but the theaters. So Shakespeare's theater was still paid. That is not the case in Broadway right now. There's a lot of actors right now who don't have any money. But at the time, Shakespeare would have gone to the country, and he would have either written in the country, or his theater troupe might have made a troupe around the country, made a visit around the country to perform some plays in areas that hopefully didn't have the plague. But I have to say, small towns did not welcome them. They were thought to bring the plague with them. We can see just from the death records what a pressure there was to get out of London. And of course, poor people couldn't leave London. So we're talking about a privileged group of successful playwrights who were able to leave London. For those of you who may have forgotten about King Lear, it's the story of a king who had 3 daughters, Regan, Goneril, and Cordelia, his youngest, and he decides to divide his kingdom into 3 parts. He calls all 3 young women in. He says, "Tell me how much you love me, and tell me how well you'll care for me in my old age, and I'm going to divide up my kingdom on the basis of that." Regan and Goneril say, "Oh, we love you so much. I'm going to take care of you forever. I love you, love you, love you." And Cordelia says, I can't speak like this. I can't throw my heart into my mouth to tell you that I love you in order to get a piece of land. So he disinherits her. He's furious. And it really is, in some sense, a story of dementia.
No, you unnatural hags. I will have revenges on you both, that all the world shall.
He's losing his mind.
I will do such things. What they are yet, I know not, but they shall be terror on the earth. You think I'll weep? No. I'll not weep. I have full cause of weeping, but this heart shall break into 100,000 flaws ere I'll weep. Oh, fool. I shall go mad.
He ends up on the heath, which is this just great expanse of land in the early modern period that's unowned, and he's naked in the storm. And I do think there's a sense there that we're up against nature, that nature is bigger than we are, right? That it's more powerful than we are. And he realizes that. There's this moment when he says, is man no more than this?
Consider him well. Thou owest the worm no silk, the beast no hide, the sheep no wool, the cat no perfume. Here's 3 are sophisticated. Thou art the thing itself. Unaccommodated man is no more but such a poor, bare, forked animal as thou art. Go! Off, you tendings!
Bare, forked animal. He's been a king, and now he's no more than a forked animal. And I think there's a way in which that powerlessness in the face of plague, in the face of something that can simply wipe out kings and beggars, is, resounds through that play and resounds through our feeling of trauma now.
It certainly offers a lot, considering it now, especially this sort of democratization, that any tragedy like this, it doesn't take sides, doesn't adhere to politics or national lines. It's all or nothing.
We do have to remember, though, that in our time and then, Shakespeare was very privileged to be able to go to the country. And so it's democratization in that everyone who comes across it can die, but not in that you can shield yourself if you're able to shield yourself, right? The interesting thing about Lear, in a way, is that Shakespeare was able to shield himself. He did survive to a very old age for that time period. And yet he clearly understood that people who don't have his privilege and his money are naked, alone on the heath, with nature howling at their ears. Lear is alone and he's mad, right? He goes mad, and his children have forsaken him. I mean, he forsook Cordelia, but the others have thrown him out, and he's vulnerable to everything. And of course, he does die in the end. It's a tragedy, right? And this particular coronavirus is making us look very closely at the vulnerability of the age and what do we most care about in our culture. So, we have all these differing voices saying, calling for the importance of the aged, or saying, no, the economy is more important, or, there's just a lot of conversation right now. And this makes me think there was probably a lot of similar conversation during Shakespeare's time, because he was definitely interested in what happens to the aged if the younger people desert them.
Thou nature art my goddess. To thy law my services are bound. Wherefore should I stand in the plague of custom, and permit the curiosity of nations to deprive me, for that I am some 12 or 14 moonshines lag of a brother? Why bastard? Wherefore base? When my dimensions are as well compact. My mind is generous, my shape is true as honest madam's issue. Why brand they us with base? With baseness? Bastardy, base, as to legitimate. Our father's love is to the bastard Edmund. Fine word. Legitimate.
Lear is not the only father in the play. There's also Gloucester and his 2 sons.
Edmund the base shall top the legitimate. I grow, I prosper. Now, gods, stand up for bastards.
You have Edmund, the ambitious one, who forsakes his father, sends him through hell, and he's the one that ends up getting his comeuppance. Whereas Edgar rekindles this relationship with his father, and he takes care of him in his blindness, in his loss of self, and he's rewarded when they're literally fought together in the final battle between those 2 different types of sons. Edgar's the one that wins.
Yeah, and what saves Gloucester, who's an old man who's blinded and thrown out on the heath, right, is kindness and filial loyalty in the end. So I think Shakespeare makes King Lear into a very straightforward lesson for us. We need to be compassionate. We need to be loyal. We need to be kind. We need to realize that the elder people are as important to us as everyone else. Everyone is a poor forked animal in the end.
The weight of the sad time we must obey.
Speak what we feel, not what we ought to say.
The oldest hath borne most. We that are young shall never see so much,
Nor live so long.
In the end, King Lear is about love.
Yeah.
Cordelia loves him, and he doesn't recognize love for what it is. But by the end, he knows what love is, and that's the greatest joy. He's fine. He's okay to die.
So interesting to think that last image of Cordelia in his arms. And for a play that is all about division and running away and being cast away and just chaos and the pain of each other, and also the natural forces, that it ends with this sort of moment of love, of acceptance. The potential for human vulnerability is this community, this kindness that people bring out in times of hardship.
It's time to pick up the threads of loves that we might have left behind with all this space and silence. And that's a lovely thing.
This man no more than this. Come, consider him well. Thou owest